You've claimed your victory, while I've been left in shambles. You walked away with the house, the money, and an upgraded partner. Tonight, the hotel room is yours, along with every detail I meticulously planned. Don't bother returning the gift. It would only serve as a cruel reminder of your betrayal. I'm driving home now, with no intention of ever crossing paths with you, him, or anyone in your circle again. Let me know when your team plans to pick up your things. Whatever is unnecessary will be boxed up, a perfect metaphor for the wreckage of our marriage. To quote my father, a proud Air Force man, good for me and screw you. I'm done being your doormat. Enjoy your life, Lily. You've earned it with your masterful performance. Fast forward 10 years to a dreary Wednesday morning. I was abruptly jolted awake by loud banging. Squinting at the clock through groggy eyes, I saw it was 8:15 a.m. The relentless knocking came from my front door. Who in their right mind would come by at this hour? Throwing on my robe and slipping into my slippers, I shuffled downstairs, growing more annoyed as the noise persisted. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a woman, unkempt and disheveled. Opening the door with a sharp retort ready, I froze. It took me a moment to recognize her. Older, thinner, her once lustrous hair streaked with gray. She looked weathered, like someone who'd spent years lurking under overpasses. Her tattered dress and unwashed scent confirmed it. It was Lily, my ex-wife. Yes, John, it's me. Can I come in? She begged, her voice shaky and desperate. I slammed the door without hesitation. Another knock came almost immediately, followed by her muffled sobs. Please, John, I'm begging you. Open the door. To stop the incessant pounding, I flung the door open, but I stood firm in the doorway, blocking her from coming inside. The last thing I needed was to give my nosy neighbors more gossip fodder. What do you want, Lily? My voice was cold, dripping with disdain. I made myself perfectly clear 10 years ago. I never want to see you again. Never. What part of that didn't you understand? And why are you here? I thought you and your precious Dr. Wonderful were playing house in Milwaukee. Lily wiped her tear-streaked face, her gaze hollow and pleading. Can I come in? I'm exhausted, starving, and I really need to use the bathroom. Her feet shuffled nervously, and as a former teacher, I recognized the signs of someone about to have an accident. Not wanting her to humiliate herself on my porch, I grudgingly stepped aside. You remember where the bathroom is? I said curtly, reminding her of the life we once shared. Make it quick. Thanks, she murmured, darting past me. She dropped a worn suitcase in the hallway and bolted toward the downstairs bathroom. I shut the door behind her and went upstairs to use the bathroom myself, hoping to delay any conversation. When I returned, she was still in there. Shrugging off my irritation, I went to the kitchen and brewed a cup of coffee. By the time she emerged, looking slightly less disheveled, I was sipping my cup in the living room. Can I have a cup? She asked softly, her voice trembling. I hesitated, torn between my simmering anger and the basic decency I was raised with. Striking a balance, I replied, I'm not heartless, but don't expect me to serve you like I used to. Begrudgingly, I handed her a mug. It's nothing fancy, milk and sugar, if you need them. Black is fine, she said quietly, clutching the cup with shaky hands. Sitting across from her, I wasted no time. Why are you here, Lily? Her gaze dropped. I've got nowhere else to go, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I spent my last few dollars on cab fare to get here. I couldn't resist twisting the knife. What happened to your night in shining scrubs, Dr. Mark? Her shoulders slumped. It all fell apart, she mumbled. After the divorce, Mark and I got married, but things went downhill fast. He was hit with a huge malpractice lawsuit, and we both lost our jobs and medical licenses. We lost everything. Then he turned violent, blaming me for our mess. When I caught him cheating, it was the final straw. So, karma finally came knocking? I shot back, my tone razor sharp. Not so funny when it's you on the receiving end, is it? Her lip quivered and she whimpered. It's not funny at all, John. Just like it wasn't funny when you humiliated me in public on our anniversary. Do you realize today marks the 10th anniversary of that night? I asked, my voice devoid of sympathy. No, I didn't, she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. Did you at least report him to the cops? I asked, my tone softening just slightly. No. I was too scared, she admitted. But I did divorce him. Problem is, I walked away with nothing, barely enough to survive. I haven't eaten in 2 days. What do you want from me, Lily? Sympathy? You'll find it somewhere between crap and chlamydia in the dictionary. I spat, unable to hold back my bitterness. Her reply was venomous. I hate you. I hate you as much as I used to love you, she hissed. And now that your world's crumbled, you've come crawling back to me? I growled. Where are all your friends? Your family? They've abandoned me, she choked out through sobs. Not exactly shocking, I muttered, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Did you and the good doctor have any kids? No. Turns out Mark is infertile, she said bitterly. He blamed me for that too. Well, at least the world's been spared your combined genetics, I quipped, unable to resist the jab. Her expression twisted with disgust. What happened to you, John? You used to be so kind, so caring. My anger boiled over. You want to know what happened to me? I barked. Look in the damn mirror. You happened. You destroyed me. Thanks to you, I can't love. I can't trust. The nice guy you knew died the day you ripped me apart. Lily's eyes widened in shock. I thought you'd move on, she stammered. I thought you'd find someone else. Get real, I snapped. You never even hinted that I was just your fallback plan. I thought we had something solid, but you lied. 13 years, 10 as husband and wife gone. Do you really think I can trust anyone after that? I exhaled sharply, trying to suppress my anger. And how many women would want damaged goods? Not that there's been a line, I muttered under my breath. Not one. So are you surprised I've spent a decade hiding, licking my wounds? I asked, my tone bitter. No, I suppose not, Lily admitted softly, staring at the floor. And now here you are, I said, my voice dripping with disdain. What do you want? A roof? Someone to take care of you while you wait for another Prince Charming? I hoped you'd let me stay, just until I get back on my feet, she pleaded. There's a shelter downtown, I pointed out coldly. That's what they're for. That's where my tax dollars go, to keep people like you off the streets. I tried, she said, her voice cracking. They're all full. Even the church had no space. Please, John. I'll do anything, cook, clean, whatever you need. I stared at her, my anger simmering. What makes you think I'd want you here? I hissed. To me, you're contaminated, like poison. Her shoulders slumped, and tears dripped onto the table. That's when it hit me. You've been trying to sell yourself, haven't you? She nodded, her face burning with shame. What do I even look like now? No takers, right? She asked softly. I studied her closely, taking in her worn appearance. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, I said cruelly. Maybe I should just go, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Maybe I should disappear and die in some alley since no one wants me. Despite everything, the sight of her like this, broken, desperate, was jarring. My hatred for her still burned, but seeing her in shambles stirred a faint sense of pity. Then there was Mark, the man who'd taken her from me, only to leave her in ruins. My anger shifted toward him. After a deep breath, I forced myself to focus. You're starving, I said bluntly. Let's eat. Lily nodded, her gratitude evident. I made scrambled eggs and bacon, the way she used to make them for me. When I placed the plate in front of her, her face lit up at the sight of melted cheese on the eggs. She devoured the food quickly. This is amazing, she said between bites. Thank you, John. When she finished, she declined more food but shyly asked for another cup of coffee. Sure, I replied, handing her a fresh cup. Feeling better? A little, she admitted. The food helped. Good. A shower might help more, I said bluntly. No offense, but you stink. Her face fell, and she looked away. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Can I use your shower? You know where it is, I replied. Towels are in the same place. My robe's on the door. Don't put your clothes back on after. Throw them in the washer. She nodded and shuffled toward the bathroom. As she closed the door, I grumbled about the mess this was turning into. I busied myself with the dishes, reflecting on everything that had brought me here. The betrayal, the counseling, and the way I poured my pain into writing. Publishing a book about my experience had brought some closure, but martial arts had been my real outlet. In the beginning, my intensity during sparring nearly got me kicked out. It took a retired Marine at the community center to teach me how to channel my emotions into precision rather than letting them control me. That discipline had carried me through, but seeing Lily again tested my resolve. When she emerged from the bathroom, she looked slightly cleaner but still worn. She'd started laundry and was now sitting in my old robe and slippers, waiting quietly in the living room. "Want another coffee?" I asked, trying to break the silence. "Yes, please," she said softly. I poured her another cup and sat across from her. She sipped it with trembling hands, murmuring, "Thanks." Unsure of what to do next, I decided to call my mom. "Morning, John," she greeted cheerfully. "What's going on?" "Guess who showed up at my door this morning?" I said, skipping the small talk. "Who?" she asked, intrigued. "Lily," I admitted, bracing for her reaction. I heard her sigh. What does she want? I recounted Lily's desperate situation and her plea for help. "Mom, she looks awful. My gut says I should kick her out, but you'd regret it if something happened to her," my mom finished. "Yeah," I said reluctantly. "And it's not like she treated Mark any better than he treated her." "I know she hurt you deeply," Mom said gently, "but maybe you should hear her out. How about I come over later?" Knowing my mom's knack for sorting things out, I agreed. "Thanks, Mom. I'd appreciate it." After our call, I threw myself into chores, trying to stay busy. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt and headed back downstairs. Lily was still waiting in the living room, sipping her coffee. Though she smelled better, her appearance was still hauntingly frail. "I'll leave once my clothes are done," Lily said softly, not meeting my eyes. "No hurry," I replied, trying to sound neutral. "But I do have some questions, if you don't mind." "Sure," she said hesitantly, as if bracing herself. "You said Mark faced malpractice claims. Don't doctors like him usually have insurance for that?" I asked. "They do," she explained, "but it turned into a class action lawsuit. The insurance company refused to cover him because there were already so many judgments against him. And some of those claims were legitimate, weren't they?" I pressed, narrowing my eyes. "The unproven ones were dismissed because there wasn't enough evidence," she admitted. "But yes, some were true. It didn't matter in the end. The damage was done. We lost our jobs, our licenses, and everything we'd built. Didn't you have retirement savings? For 401ks?" I asked, surprised. "We did," she said with a bitter sigh. "We lived off them for about a year, but the penalties were brutal. In the end, it wasn't enough. We lost everything." I couldn't help but smirk. "And what's Mark doing now? Still dreaming big?" "He's a parking attendant. Makes $16 an hour," she said flatly. The thought of Mark's ego taking that hit almost made me laugh out loud. "And what about you? What are your plans now?" "I was thinking about trying office work in the medical field," she replied cautiously. "I know I've lost my nursing license, but I'm hopeful I can still find something." "Best of luck with that," I said, my tone a little sharper than I intended. "What about transportation and housing?" "I can take the bus or walk," she said, her voice tinged with resignation. "But housing is tricky. It all takes money, and I don't have much left." "You expected me to support you until you got back on your feet, didn't you?" I asked bluntly, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "Yes," she admitted after a moment of silence. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I hoped you might show me some kindness. I sacrificed a lot in the divorce, but I was too blind to see your struggles back then. I realize now that assuming your help was a mistake." "You're right about one thing. I don't owe you anything," I said firmly. She seemed to wilt at my words, but I sighed and added, "But I'm not heartless. You clearly need help. My mom's on her way over, and she wants to talk to you before I make any decisions." Lily's face lit up with a mixture of relief and surprise. "Your mom always meant so much to me," she said softly. "She still cares, believe it or not," I replied. "But you need to be completely honest with her. No half-truths. Got it? I promise, Lily said, nodding earnestly. Then, after a moment of hesitation, she added, and John? Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, I said curtly. Mom arrived shortly after, and I greeted her at the door with a hug. Lily, goodness, has it really been 10 years? Mom exclaimed, her tone a mix of surprise and warmth as she spotted Lily sitting in my old robe. Both women embraced, exchanging pleasantries. It's nice to see you again, Helen, Lily said, her voice soft but genuine. John, dear, why don't you give us some girl time? Mom suggested with a knowing smile. Understanding she wanted privacy, I retreated to my home office. Once there, I decided to dig deeper into Mark's malpractice case. What I found was worse than I expected. Mark had diagnosed nearly 97% of his 2,000 patients with epilepsy over 4 years. Many were children who were misdiagnosed and subjected to unnecessary treatments. The hospital had to refund $300,000 in improper billing charges, and both Mark and Lily were implicated. Their licenses were revoked, and their reputations destroyed. I felt a surge of anger, not just toward Mark but toward Lily for her part in it. Even if she wasn't the mastermind, she hadn't stopped it. My thoughts were interrupted when Mom came to find me. She looked troubled. John, I think Lily's sick, she said bluntly. Why do you think that? I asked, caught off guard. Her appearance, her energy level, it's all too familiar. I've seen it before. I'd bet she's dealing with something serious, maybe even cancer, she said gravely. What are you suggesting? I asked cautiously. I called Dr. Thompson. He agreed to see her today and run some tests. If there's something wrong, he'll help her apply for Medicaid and refer her to specialists if needed. I'll drive her there myself, Mom explained, her tone leaving no room for argument. You can't afford that, I protested, handing her $200 to cover the visit. Thanks, John. You're a good son, she said with a small, sad smile. Let's be clear, I replied firmly. I'm doing this because of how you and Dad raised me, not for her. This doesn't mean I forgive her, and it definitely doesn't mean I'll take her back. I understand, Mom said gently. After a pause, I asked, did she tell you Mark assaulted her? Yes, she did, Mom confirmed, her face neutral. I nodded, my hands balling into fists at the thought. Keep me updated, I said quietly. I will, Mom promised, kissing my forehead before leaving. When I came downstairs, Lily was waiting in clean clothes, still looking frail but slightly better. Thanks for breakfast, she murmured timidly, avoiding my gaze. You're welcome, I replied stiffly. After they left, I locked the door and made myself another coffee. I spent some time researching Wisconsin's spousal abuse laws, but was discouraged to find that the statute of limitations likely prevented any action against Mark. Frustrated, I entertained the idea of taking matters into my own hands, but quickly dismissed it. Needing to clear my head, I changed into workout gear and pushed myself through a grueling session on my stationary bike. Exercise had become my escape over the years, transforming me from unfit and angry to disciplined and focused. Afterward, I showered, had a light lunch, and caught up on the news, still uneasy about what lay ahead. By the time I listened to Mom's voicemail, it was mid-afternoon. I called her back immediately. Was wondering where you guys were, I said as she picked up. Just finished with Dr. Thompson, Mom replied, her tone weary. I could tell Lily wasn't nearby. Any updates? I asked. Thompson's concerned about Lily. Her test results suggest cervical cancer. He's already arranged an appointment with an oncologist for Friday. She's applied for Medicaid and emergency assistance, Mom said carefully. Cervical cancer? I echoed, surprised but not entirely shocked. He also suspects physical abuse, she added, her voice quiet. We already knew that, I acknowledged. She mentioned not eating, but Thompson thinks it's more severe than that. She's malnourished, missing essential nutrients, Mom said, her concern evident. Hearing her worry, I nodded to myself. It's late. Why don't you take her for a meal, grab some essentials and her suitcase? She should probably stay with you for now so you can talk, I suggested. Sounds like a plan, Mom agreed. Keep me posted, I said. I will. Love you, John, she said gently. Love you too, Mom. A few hours later, They were finally on their way. While Lily packed, Mom and I talked in my study. Sorry for the delay, Mom began. No worries. What's the plan? I asked. Caring for Lily, at least until her appointment, Mom explained. And John, she still cares about you. I thought you should know. There's no reconciliation happening, I said firmly. Not after the lies and infidelity. Understood, Mom replied, though I noticed the disappointment in her voice. But she thinks she can win you back. That's out of the question, I snapped. Besides, I've changed. I miss the old you, Mom admitted softly, almost wistfully. Can you join us for dinner Friday? She asked. I'm making lasagna. Absolutely, I agreed. Your lasagna always brings a smile. We hugged briefly before returning to the front room, where Lily waited with her packed suitcase. I'll stay with your mom, if that's okay, Lily said weakly. That's up to her, I replied, glancing at Mom, who gave a small nod. Thanks for breakfast and for listening, Lily said tearfully. You're welcome, I replied, my tone neutral. Don't forget about dinner Friday, Mom reminded unnecessarily. I'll be there. I promise, I assured her. Over the next 2 days, I stayed busy with work and household chores. With school out for the summer, I focused on curriculum planning and home maintenance. I trusted Mom's ability to care for Lily. She was resourceful and had a way of navigating even the toughest situations. Finally, Friday arrived. After a shower, I stopped to pick up wine and headed to Mom's for dinner. Arriving at 6:15, Lily greeted me at the door. She led me inside, looking frail and on the verge of tears. I thanked her and stepped into the kitchen, where Mom's face lit up at the sight of the wine. Perfect timing, John, she said cheerfully. We sat down to eat, but Lily seemed visibly distressed throughout the meal. After some small talk, I finally asked, how did things go today? We managed to get Lily's Medicaid application approved, Mom reported with a mix of relief and exhaustion. Thank goodness for this newfangled internet system. I wish they'd had it back when I worked at the office. And her medical costs will be covered? I asked, needing reassurance. Yes, Mom confirmed. She'll also receive a small monthly allowance from the state. Since she'll be living here, she won't need much. They're pursuing child support from Mark, but that's like squeezing blood from a turnip, I muttered grimly. That's good news, at least, I said. And the oncologist? Lily's expression darkened as Mom explained. They found stage 4 cervical cancer. It's spreading rapidly through her body. Can it be treated? I asked, wrestling with my emotions. Maybe, Mom replied cautiously, glancing at Lily for consent. Lily nodded tearfully. Her survival odds are less than 20%, even with treatment, Mom continued. But if caught earlier, her chances would have been over 90%. That's terrible, I said. Mark didn't notice anything? No, Lily admitted. He never mentioned it. I noticed changes, but I didn't want to worry him. What kind of changes? I asked delicately. Closeness became painful, Lily confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. We stopped altogether for a while. I redirected the conversation, trying to keep the focus productive. New medications might help, I said. Mom added, they could improve her odds by 10 to 15%. What's your plan? I asked Lily. Fight. I'm not ready to give up, she declared, a hint of determination breaking through her fragile demeanor. And how long will treatment last? I questioned Mom. Up to a year, maybe longer, she replied. So Lily will stay here? I pressed. Yes, I think it's best. I'll care for her, Mom assured me. I sighed heavily, reluctant but unable to argue. I suppose that makes sense. Can you handle this? Mom looked at me knowingly. Your father and I raised you to be kind, John. You'll do the right thing. I glanced at Lily, memories of her betrayal flooding back. Her actions with Mark, her lies. It all resurfaced. Sensing my change in demeanor, Lily began to speak. I know you don't trust me, but... Understatement, I interrupted sharply. If you hurt my mother or cause trouble, I'll kick you out, cancer or not. Understand? Yes, Lily replied quietly, tears welling up in her eyes. Mom quickly intervened, suggesting dessert. I can help, I offered, but she waved me off. You two could use some time alone, she said, leaving the room. Lily wiped her face, her voice trembling as she spoke. I started reading your book, she admitted. I was that terrible. I have footage from that night, I revealed bluntly. Would you like to see it? Lily shook her head, stunned. No wonder you despise me, she said, her voice breaking as she sobbed. It's all in the book, I said. I imagined revenge for years. Lily was horrified, her face pale as Mom returned with apple pie. Yolanda suggested exercise, Mom added casually, breaking the tension. That's why you look so fit now? Lily asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Yes, I confirmed. I've been doing martial arts and focusing on fitness. But you're still angry, she observed quietly. It's better, Mom interjected gently. 2 years ago, John wouldn't have even walked through the door if you were here. I'm truly sorry, John, Lily said, her voice breaking. I really am. I knew what I did would hurt you, but I didn't expect it to devastate you like this. That's why I gave you everything in the divorce. I thought it might help you recover. When you didn't contest it, I assumed you'd be okay. To be honest, my lawyer was shocked when he saw your petition. He told me to sign it immediately, worried I might change my mind. I admitted. Have you dated anyone since then? Lily asked hesitantly, as if bracing herself. Not really, I replied bluntly. Just a couple of drunken one-night stands. I don't even remember their names. I caught Mom's eyebrows shoot up in silent disapproval, a fleeting look of disgust crossing her face, but she kept her thoughts to herself. At that moment, I didn't care. Oh God, Lily murmured, sounding pained. I don't know what to say. A simple sorry won't be enough, will it? No, I said bitterly. We ate the rest of the pie in silence. Lily looked hurt, and I avoided making eye contact with Mom. After saying goodbye, Mom walked me to the door, where I lowered my voice. Are you sure you're doing the right thing, Mom? I asked. What about her family? Can't they help? I called her parents and sister, Mom said sadly, but they refused. They want nothing to do with her. What a screwed-up family, I muttered. You didn't abandon me, even when I turned bitter. Family takes care of family, Mom said tearfully. What are Lily's chances, really? I asked. Mom glanced back toward the house before answering. It's hard to say. Treatments have improved, but her condition is advanced. A lot depends on her will to fight. I'm worried about you, I said. What if she does something behind your back? People at rock bottom can be dangerous. They've got nothing to lose. I understand your concern, John, Mom said gently, but I'll be careful. If I need anything, I'll let you know. Please do, I urged. Thanks for dinner, Mom. I'll be in touch. Love you. Love you too, son, she said, kissing my cheek. And please, try to keep your emotions in check. Don't push her further. I'll try, I sighed. That's all I ask, she said, smiling faintly. And I promise not to play matchmaker. Thank you, I replied with a small smile before heading out. The next 2 months passed quickly as I buried myself in home projects and prepared for the upcoming school year. On Fridays, I visited Mom's house for dinner, where I witnessed the toll chemotherapy was taking on Lily. The treatments left her frail and weakened, and by mid-August, she had lost all her hair, wearing a stylish chemo cap instead. While my feelings toward her hadn't changed, I made an effort to be polite, for Mom's sake more than Lily's. Lily also started receiving deductions from Mark's paycheck, though the amounts were small. She opened a bank account, with Mom overseeing the funds to ensure everything was handled properly. Lily insisted on contributing toward expenses, and Mom agreed, setting aside 10% for emergencies. On the eve of the new school year, I arrived at Mom's house to find an unfamiliar car parked outside. As I stepped inside, I spotted Mark. The sight of him triggered an immediate sense of unease. Both Mom and Lily seemed apprehensive. Mark was a shadow of his former self, unkempt, wearing dirty jeans and a rumpled shirt. His arrogance, however, remained intact. Well, look who it is. The arrogant teacher, Mark sneered, his voice dripping with hostility. My patience snapped. My martial arts training had taught me to avoid conflict whenever possible, but seeing him here pushed me dangerously close to the edge. "What's your business here, Mark?" I asked coldly. "I want the money that woman took from me," he growled, pointing toward Lily. "Took?" I replied evenly, though my disdain was evident. "The court mandated a portion of your income for alimony. That's not taking." "It's all the same," Mark hissed. "They drained my account. Now I'm facing eviction because I can't pay my rent." "Funny," I said, my tone icy. "You had enough money to travel here from Milwaukee. Maybe you should have used it for rent." "Don't play games with me, teacher," he snapped. "Maybe I should have taught you a lesson 10 years ago." "She stopped me," Mark added, gesturing toward Lily. "Said I should treat you with respect for taking care of her all those years. How about you leave, and we pretend none of this happened?" I suggested, raising my hands in an attempt to diffuse the escalating tension. My instinct screamed that Mark wasn't stable, and a confrontation could spiral out of control. Mark laughed bitterly. "Cancer, huh? Is that another one of her lies?" he scoffed. Placing his soda and sandwich aside, Mark reached behind him and produced a revolver. "Funny thing is, I happen to have the cure for that," he taunted, aiming the weapon at Lily. "Mark, please," Mom said, her voice trembling. She gestured subtly toward the phone on the table. "I've already called the police. They're on their way." As Mark turned toward Mom, I began inching closer to position myself between him and Lily. Noticing my movement, Mark quickly redirected the gun at me. "Stay put, teacher." "Not one move," he barked, his hands trembling. His desperation was palpable. At that moment, flashing red and blue lights appeared outside the windows, followed by the booming voice of a police officer over a loudspeaker. "Mr. Evans, this is the police. The house is surrounded. We know you're armed. Put the weapon down and step outside. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up," the officer instructed through the speaker. "You should listen," I warned Mark, who stood frozen, wide-eyed and visibly rattled. "How did they know I had a weapon?" Mark muttered, his voice trembling. "I told them," Mom said, her tone steady but firm. "I saw it tucked in your waistband. John's right. You need to follow their orders." "This is your final chance, Mr. Evans," the officer called out again. "Surrender the weapon and exit the premises." Mark's eyes darted between us and the window. His hands shook, and I could see his resolve faltering. For a brief moment, our eyes met. "If you were smart, you'd comply," I said evenly. "There won't be another warning." Suddenly, the back door creaked open, and 2 officers entered the room, pistols drawn and aimed at Mark. "Drop your weapon," one officer barked. Mark turned sharply, panic flashing across his face as he realized he was cornered. But instead of surrendering, he raised the revolver recklessly. The officers fired in unison. The shots rang out, deafening in the confined space. Lily's scream shattered the silence that followed, jolting me as the scene unfolded. 2 more officers rushed in as Mom clutched her chest and sank to the floor, her heirloom brooch falling from her hand. I froze, watching as the paramedics arrived and tended to both Lily and Mom. Another officer checked Mark's lifeless body and confirmed his passing. The sight left me shaken, relief and resentment swirling uneasily inside me. The paramedics stabilized Mom, who had fainted from the shock, while Lily was prepared for transport. "I'll go with you to the hospital," I offered, steadying Mom as she regained her composure. Detectives arrived soon after, taking our statements and advising us to leave. "We'll secure the house and arrange a cleaning service," one of them assured me. As I drove Mom to the hospital, my thoughts spiraled. The surreal events of the day weighed heavily on me. Lily, the woman I once despised, the one who had betrayed me, was now fighting for her life. Though a flicker of remorse crept in, I shoved it aside. At the hospital, we navigated the usual bureaucracy before settling in the waiting area. Hours passed before a doctor finally approached us. "Mrs. Walker?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," Mom replied, standing to greet him. "How's Lily?" "Miss Evans is stable and improving," the doctor explained. "She's fortunate. The bullet passed through without hitting any vital organs. Just a bit to the left, and it could have been fatal." "Thank the Lord," Mom said, exhaling deeply. "But there's a complication. the doctor continued. Her cancer, combined with the chemotherapy, has left her body in a severely weakened state. We've also detected signs of a possible systemic infection. I've ordered further tests to confirm. Oh no, Mom sighed, her worry deepening. Will she be okay? It's too early to say, the doctor admitted. We'll keep her here for at least 3 days. She's sedated for now. Can we visit her? Mom asked. Not yet. Tomorrow morning, perhaps, the doctor said, handing Mom a card with contact information. You can call for updates or to confirm her room assignment. The drive back to Mom's house was silent, punctuated only by her quiet sobs. My own thoughts raced, grappling with the reality of Lily's situation. The woman I once fantasized about taking revenge on was now lying in a hospital bed, fragile and vulnerable. Though guilt gnawed at me, I pushed it down. When we arrived, the crime scene tape was already removed, and a note from the detective declared the house cleared. Inside, Mom wasted no time cleaning up. I disposed of the blood-stained chair Lily had been shot in, and when I returned, I found Mom scrubbing the floor, tears streaking her face. Let me help, I offered. No, she said firmly, her voice quivering. I need to do this myself. I suggested she stay at my place for the night, but she refused. Respecting her decision, I resolved to stay with her instead. Despite her protests, I cooked dinner while she continued cleaning. We shared a glass of wine afterward, letting the exhaustion of the day settle over us. For a while, we sat in silence, the weight of the events too heavy for words. The next morning was quiet until the phone rang at 10 a.m. I retreated to the kitchen to give Mom privacy. When she joined me minutes later, she relayed the update. Lily's condition remained serious but stable. Tests were underway, and she was expected to return to her room by mid-afternoon. Lost in thought, I barely registered Mom's words. Around 2:30, I drove her to the hospital, stopping beforehand to run a few errands. I picked up Lily's favorite flowers and a book she had once loved, though I didn't know why I bothered. At the register, Mom teased me lightly, her playful tone momentarily easing the tension. You're showing her a lot of kindness, she said. It's nothing, I replied dismissively, though her words lingered. We arrived at Lily's room to find her awake but drained. Mom kissed her cheek and handed her the card we'd bought. Lily's tired eyes lit up when she saw the flowers. My favorites. You remembered? She asked, her voice tinged with surprise and gratitude. Yes, I replied simply, handing her the novel. If I remember correctly, you were reading this when you left with Mark. My tone was flat, but a pang of emotion stirred within me. Yes, she said softly. I was, but I never got to finish it. Thank you, Lily murmured softly, her eyes downcast as she thumbed through the paperback. She held it tightly, almost cradling it like a cherished possession. Any updates? Mom asked gently. Not yet, Lily replied, shaking her head. They said I probably won't hear anything for at least a day. That's okay, Mom reassured her. A nurse entered the room, her voice warm. How are you feeling, Lily? Terrible, Lily groaned. I'm exhausted, and my side and stomach ache. They'll figure it out, Mom said, patting Lily's hand comfortingly. And Mark? Lily asked abruptly, still avoiding my gaze. He was pronounced dead at the scene, Mom informed her, her tone calm but heavy. Good, Lily said firmly, a flicker of strength breaking through her frailty. I'm glad he's dead. Mom's expression darkened briefly, but she said nothing, merely nodding in understanding as she continued to pat Lily's hand. I stayed silent, watching the exchange. Hearing Lily denounce Mark brought an unexpected sense of relief, easing some of the pent-up animosity I'd harbored. Yet, it couldn't erase a decade of bitterness. Another nurse entered with a tray of medications. Time for your meds, Lily, she said, handing over a small cup of pills and a glass of water. Lily took them without hesitation, swallowing them quickly before slumping back into the bed. Just call me Lily, she requested, showing a trace of resilience despite her weariness. I'll let the staff know, the nurse replied warmly. You should rest. As we prepare to leave, Mom asked about test results. We should have more news by tomorrow morning, the nurse assured us. Lily gave me a long, almost pleading glance as we said our goodbyes. I offered her a faint smile before stepping out, closing the door behind me. After dropping Mom off, I returned home to tackle my weekend tasks. The following morning, we reunited in Lily's hospital room. Mom, who had been volunteering part-time at the hospital, had arrived earlier and was already seated by Lily's bedside. Not long after my arrival, two doctors entered the room. They introduced themselves as Dr. Edwards, Lily's surgeon, and Dr. Bennett, her oncologist. Their professionalism couldn't mask the concern etched across their faces. "What's the update?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. Dr. Bennett answered first, though his tone was cautious. "Ms. Evans is grappling with peritonitis and diverticulitis. These conditions explain many of the symptoms she's been experiencing," he said. Dr. Edwards continued. "Our scans have also detected large pockets of infection in her abdomen. Additionally, it appears her gallbladder is perforated and will need to be removed." "How did this happen?" I asked, feeling Mom's hand tighten on mine. "There are likely multiple factors," Dr. Bennett explained, "but it seems an underlying condition was exacerbated by her cancer and the effects of chemotherapy." "What's the next step?" Mom asked softly. "She'll eventually need surgery to address the infection and repair the damage. However, we need to give her body more time to recover from her recent surgery," Dr. Edwards said. "For now, we'll keep her on high-dose antibiotics and monitor her progress for the next couple of weeks. During this time, chemotherapy will be paused." "And her odds?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The two doctors exchanged a brief glance before Dr. Edwards spoke. "I won't sugarcoat it. Without surgery, her chances of survival are virtually non-existent. The infection is contained for now, but it's not resolving on its own. Surgery is the only option, but it comes with significant risks, especially given her weakened state." Dr. Bennett added, "Even with surgery, the survival rate is only around 30 to 40%, given the extent of the infection and damage to her internal organs. Malnutrition has severely impacted her body's ability to recover. She won't be able to resume chemotherapy until her infections are eradicated and her overall health improves." Lily, who had been silent, finally spoke. "So, without surgery, my chances are slim to none?" she asked, her voice steady despite the wide-eyed fear in her expression. "Unfortunately, that's correct," Dr. Bennett confirmed. Lily took a deep breath, her frail frame sinking further into the bed. "Then we don't have a choice," she said quietly. "Let's do the surgery." "Very well," Dr. Edwards said. "We'll organize everything and keep you updated." After the doctors left, Lily broke down in tears. Mom wrapped her in a tight embrace, stroking her back soothingly. "Don't worry, Lily," Mom said softly. "You've got the best medical team on your side. Everything will work out." Lily continued to sob, her face buried in Mom's shoulder. I stood to the side, grappling with my own thoughts. Not long ago, I might have welcomed the idea of Lily's demise, but now my emotions were in turmoil. The bitterness I had clung to for so long was shifting into something else, something I couldn't quite define. "I have to head out," I said finally, breaking the silence. "School starts tomorrow, but I'll check in on you from time to time." Lily glanced at me with watery eyes, nodding weakly. "Thank you, John," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Without another word, I left the room, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting feelings as I prepared to return to the rhythm of my own life. "I'd appreciate that, John," Lily said softly, her voice tinged with both gratitude and sadness. Mom smiled at me, the kind of smile that conveyed both pride and exhaustion. After we said our goodbyes, I walked Mom to her car and waved as she drove away. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my promise, visiting Lily several times. Our conversations ranged from my teaching and students to her ill-fated marriage with Mark and, eventually, our own failed marriage. We explored the pain we had caused each other, peeling back the layers of bitterness and regret. One afternoon, as we sat in her hospital room, I decided to bring up a topic that had always puzzled me. "I'm curious about something," I began cautiously. "What is it?" Lily asked, her tone tentative. "What's the deal with your family? Why do they dislike you so much?" Mom told me she reached out to them, but they didn't want anything to do with you. Lily sighed deeply. Remember when I told you they disowned me after the lawsuit? Yes, I replied, nodding. What I didn't tell you, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, is that they knew about Mark from the start. They agreed to keep you in the dark in exchange for his support. Mark promised to take care of them financially. He even offered to pay for their retirement and buy them cruise tickets. I stared at her, anger bubbling beneath the surface. And you and your sister knew about this? She looked down at her hands, ashamed. Yes, she said quietly, before looking back up at me. It was another betrayal, I know. I'm deeply sorry. So your family used you and Mark the same way you used me, I observed coldly. Lily flinched, her misery evident. I shouldn't have asked if I didn't want the answer, I said after a moment, softening slightly. Mostly, Lily admitted, her voice full of regret. Things went downhill after the lawsuit. My family cut ties with me when they realized Mark wouldn't help them anymore. That explains how they treated me after you left, I remarked. And why you thought it was acceptable to use me while waiting for Mark. Lily didn't respond, her silence a quiet admission of guilt. Despite the heaviness of our conversation, I glimpsed fleeting traces of the woman I had fallen in love with years ago. It sparked a strange flicker of hope, though I quickly snuffed it out. Too much had happened. Reconciliation seemed impossible. Mr. Johnson, my principal, was kind enough to arrange for a substitute teacher, granting me the day off for Lily's surgery. At the hospital that morning, I stood by her bedside, struggling to find the right words before she was wheeled into the operating room. I've said a lot of hurtful things, I began awkwardly, my voice faltering. And I'm sorry for that. I hope you can pull through this. Lily's weak smile caught me off guard. Thank you, John, she said softly. I accept your apology, and I'm sorry for everything I've done to you. I love you, John. You've endured more than anyone should. Her words hit me harder than I expected, but I pushed my emotions aside. Promise me something, she added, her voice trembling. What is it? I asked. Find someone you love, no matter what, she urged sincerely. I nodded, feeling a surprising sense of absolution. I will, I said quietly. As the orderly prepared to wheel her out, I leaned down impulsively and kissed her cheek. You've got this, I reassured her, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. For a brief moment, she looked like the woman I had married all those years ago. It made me wonder if she had ever truly loved me, or if I had just been a means to an end. The thought was unsettling, but there was no time to dwell on it. The orderly guided her gurney out of the room, leaving me feeling strangely lightheaded. That was kind of you, John, Mom murmured as we followed into the hallway. We settled into the waiting area, the hours dragging as the surgery progressed. Mom crocheted quietly while I paced back and forth, drowning myself in one cup of machine coffee after another. My thoughts churned with memories of the past decade, the regrets, and the moments that had brought us here. 6 hours later, Dr. Edwards emerged from the operating room, his face heavy with exhaustion. He gestured for us to follow him into a private consultation room. I braced myself for the worst, the tension in my chest making it hard to breathe. Mom clutched my hand so tightly it felt like my fingers might break. I'm deeply sorry, Mrs. Walker, Dr. Edwards began, his voice thick with sorrow. Mr. Walker, we did everything we could for Lily, but the level of infection and the damage to her internal organs were too severe. My stomach dropped as his words confirmed my worst fears. Her body stopped functioning, and she had signed a DNR, he continued. She also consented to donate her body to cancer research. Once her heart stopped, we were unable to revive her. Please accept my condolences for your loss. Mom burst into tears, and I wrapped my arms around her as she wept into my shoulder. A single tear escaped my eye, but I refused to let more fall. Thank you for everything you did, I told Dr. Edwards, shaking his hand. I noticed a tear glistening on his cheek as he nodded solemnly and left the room. We returned to Lily's room to collect her belongings. The silence between us was heavy, words unnecessary. As I opened the bedside table drawer, I found a small envelope labeled John in Lily's familiar handwriting. I unfolded the letter and sighed, my heart heavy as I began to read. John, You will only read this if I do not survive. Thank you for being there for me, especially in these last weeks. You owe me nothing, but you and your mother stood by me when everyone else abandoned me. I realize now that what I did to you a decade ago was inexcusable, and I deeply regret the pain I caused you. Despite everything, a part of me still loves you, the letter continued, and I'm sorry for the turmoil my involvement with Mark has caused. I understand that you'll never feel the same toward me, and I respect that. My hope is that my passing will bring you peace at last. With love, Lily. The letter left me trembling. Tears streamed down my face as I handed it to Mom, unable to speak. Reading Lily's words, Mom's composure broke as well, and for the first time since my father's passing 6 years ago, I wept openly. We held each other tightly, sharing a torrent of emotions that neither of us could contain. As we packed Lily's belongings, a profound sense of change settled over me. The decade of anger and bitterness I had clung to so fiercely seemed to dissolve, replaced by an unexpected calm. Her passing, though tragic, had somehow broken down the walls I'd built to protect myself. For the first time, I felt like I was stepping out of the dark maze I'd been trapped in. Strangely, I felt a sense of healing. We left the hospital in silence, driving back to Mom's house with Lily's belongings in tow. That night, over a somber dinner, Mom handed me a photo of Lily. In it, she was smiling from her mother's favorite chair during her chemotherapy treatments. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to frame it or bury it with my memories. For now, I decided to keep it. Later, Mom suggested reaching out to Lily's family to inform them of her passing. I can make the call if you'd like, she offered gently. No, I'll handle it, I replied, though I dreaded the conversation. She handed me a piece of paper with the number. The next morning, I dialed the number, my stomach churning with unease. Richard, Lily's father, picked up on the second ring. I regret to inform you that your daughter Lily passed away during surgery yesterday, I said, keeping my tone neutral. There was a long pause before Richard grumbled. I don't have a daughter named Lily. Not anymore, I clarified. Why are you calling? He asked, his tone curt and suspicious. I thought you might want to know, I replied evenly. What do you want from me? Are you expecting us to request her body, or something? No, I said, my frustration simmering. She donated her body to cancer research. Richard snorted derisively. Well, at least her life served a purpose, he said before hanging up abruptly. I sat there for a moment, phone still in hand, the call leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. As much as I wanted to call back and unleash my anger, I knew it would accomplish nothing. Instead, I let out a long sigh and dialed my principal. I'm sorry to hear that, John, he said after I informed him of Lily's passing. How are you holding up? I'm managing, I replied, but I'll be okay. Why don't you take the rest of the week off? I'll mark it as paid parental leave and arrange for a substitute, he offered kindly. Thank you. I really appreciate it, I said, grateful for his understanding. After hanging up, I retrieved a beer from the fridge. As I opened it, my gaze drifted to the photo Mom had given me. Raising the bottle, I murmured, "Here's to you, kid," before taking a deep sip. In June, I drove to the cemetery, a place I had always felt uneasy visiting. The rows of gravestones and monuments were solemn reminders of mortality, and I parked under a large maple tree to steady my nerves. Lily's monument, though new, bore the name Evans, a bureaucratic decision I had reluctantly accepted. I placed a single white carnation in the bronze flower tube beside the marker and stood there silently, reflecting on my decision to bury her ashes instead of scattering them. Mark, in contrast, lay in a forgotten corner of the cemetery, his grave marked only by a plain concrete block with a serial number. For a brief, almost petty sense of closure, I poured a bottle of urine on his grave. As childish as the act felt, it marked the end of my anger toward him. After a few minutes of quiet reflection, I whispered, "Goodbye, Lily," and walked back to my car. I had shed all my tears at her burial and felt no need to cry again. She was at peace now, and oddly, so was I. As I approached my car, I noticed two other mourners nearby. A woman in a neat black dress with her long blonde hair braided and a young boy wearing a camouflage jacket. They stood beside a gravestone that read, Samuel G. Foster, Sergeant USMC. The woman glanced at me with wide, fearful eyes as I walked past. "I'm sorry," I murmured, not wanting to intrude. Before she could respond, the boy looked up at me and said, "I miss him so much." His voice was small but filled with longing, and his blue eyes mirrored his mother's grief. "He must have been a great man if he was anything like you," I said gently, crouching down to meet his gaze. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out a small notepad and pen, tools I used often as a teacher. "Here, kid," I said, handing them to him. "Write him a note and tuck it in that crack next to the marker. He'll get it." The boy hesitated for a moment before hugging me tightly. Then he took the notepad and pen and began writing. His mother watched with tears in her eyes, her expression shifting to one of gratitude. As I stood, I suddenly heard two soft chuckles, one in each ear, a man's and a woman's. Then a familiar female voice whispered, "Keep your promise." In that moment, a strange peace washed over me. For the first time in years, I knew June would no longer be a struggle.